video. All right, David, it's on you.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone to the City of Salem Community Police Review Board for April 9th. We're going to start off by doing introductions. My name is David Reinhold. I'm the chair of the Citizen Police Review Board, and I'm a resident of Polk County. Pass it to my right.
My name is Lance Deedy. I'm a lieutenant with Salem Police.
Steve Gallen, a sergeant with Salem Police.
Lori Evans, legal department for the city.
Malgrave Board Member, Marion County.
Aaron Paul, Polk County board member.
Gretchen Bennett, staff liaison.
Grant Yoder, Marion County.
Ryan Shands, Polk County, but here in West Salem.
Thank you, everyone. The next on our agenda would be approval of minutes. Would anybody, if you've had time to look at the minutes, would like to make a motion to accept? Or
I'll move to approve.
is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion about minutes? Any changes? Okay, we're moving second to approve the minutes from January 9th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Is there any public comment?
None received in advance, no.
Okay, any requests for hearings? None received,
None
right?
received.
And now we get to have a presentation by the Salem Police Department on professional standards unit annual report.
Okay, I can go ahead and start. My name is Lance Deedy, lieutenant with Salem Police. We're going to go ahead and pass around the annual report so everybody has it. I want to make sure that Ryan, were you able to get an electronic copy by any chance, or are you able to see that?
Gretchen, did you send me a copy? If not, if one of you just send it to me afterwards, that would be fantastic.
Will do, and I'm also sharing the screen. I did not send it out in advance, but will do.
Yeah, we can certainly share this document. This is going to be a public facing document that we will be putting out on our portal, so we can certainly use.
Okay.
Excellent. And I can see it on my screen, so thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so if anybody has any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to ask. If either Steve or I do not have the answer, we will certainly work to make sure that we get that answer. We'll get that to Gretchen so we can get that out to anybody who has any questions. But hopefully between myself, Steve, or even Lori, we can hopefully answer some of those questions. So I'll kind of tag team this with Steve, but we do essentially an annual report that carries all of the statistical information concerning any sort of professional standards, intake, on complaints that we receive, how those complaints are investigated, the amount of allegations received, whether those complaints were unfounded, sustained, not sustained, exonerated, and I'll kind of explain some of what that means. This is a 3-year statistical information, so we go back to 2021. So as I go through this report, I'll kind of talk about what you're seeing in 2021 to 2022 to 2023. And then we're pretty new into the start of 2024, so we're kind of seeing where we're going from there. But through the past 3 years, you guys will be able to kind of see what it is we're looking at. So again, as part of this complaint review process, all complaints and subsequent investigations are reviewed and collectively determine if there are any trends or deficiencies that need to be addressed through the agency, through our training, through our policies, our procedures. We take a look at all of that. Additionally, of note, the Salem Police Department does comply with the Law Enforcement Contacts Committee, that's the LECC. So anytime we receive a profiling complaint or a bias complaint, we report that at the start of the year. So the start of in January 2024, we would have reported 2023 for any sort of profiling, or bias type complaint that you receive. So we'll start on allegations first. So as you guys look at the charts 1, 2, and 3 that we passed around, that will be on page 2. In 2021, we had a total of 84 policy violations that were investigated. So a policy violation would be an allegation that an officer violated a particular policy, right? So if I'm rude to someone, there's a policy for that. If I continuously show up late to work, there's a policy for that. If I use an inappropriate or it's alleged that I inappropriately use force, there's a policy for that. So when we have an allegation, that is professional standards alleging to the officer that you violated this policy. So in 2021, we had a total of 84 policy violations. One investigation, we have multiple policies that we are alleging to be violated. In 2022, we had a total of 46 policy violations that were investigated, which was a decrease of 45% compared with 2021. In 2023, a total of 33 policy violations were investigated. And overall, when comparing the amount of policy violations in 2023 with the 3-year average, there was a 39% decrease in policy violations. That's alleged. And I'll explain what we're kind of seeing with that over that 3-year trend here in a few minutes.
Yes. Sorry, you go quickly. So is this the totality of the complaints, or are there other complaints that are not policy violations? Why are we saying we investigated policy violations as opposed to complaints?
It's a great question. So when we receive a complaint, right? So we'll intake the complaint, all complaints. We receive them all. And the individual that's making the complaint will allege whatever it is they're alleging. And then so professional standards will take that statement from the individual, look over our entire policy and law and see what they would believe the policy violation to be. And so that's the allegation.
It seems like it's whatever.
Yeah. Exactly.
And also, sometimes we get complaints where it's about the policy itself, like our vehicle crash cop policy says that if it's a non-blocking, non-injuring vehicle crash, then officers don't have to respond. Well, some people don't understand that, so they'll complain, well, why is that even a policy they should be covered? And those would not be covered.
Oh, so those are, okay, thank you, sorry.
Yeah, that's a qualifying question.
Yes.
What would cause an investigation to be open after 2022 still? Is that still in litigation, some other place we can't close it, or?
That would be just carryover, because if we get a complaint December 31st, it's still, considered for that year 2022, but it's going to be open into 2023.
Okay, but that would be reflected then on the outcomes in the 2023 chart? If there's 10, okay, great.
Yes. Well, if it's, well, let me rephrase that. So if it's an open investigation in 2023, the carryover is open, but the allegation when the finding is found would be in the previous year. So
Yes.
does that make sense? Because the investigation started in 2022, even though it carries into the new year, the
So,
investigation was
like-
opened as a 22 case.
Okay, so where would the results of these 10 open cases be captured then? Or are they still open from 2022?
They're not open to 2022.
Yeah.
Um,
It's part of how the data is when it was carried over. It statistically has that data right there to show that not carrying over.
Besides, what
Yes.
I have another question too.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned in your examples, person shows up late to work. Wouldn't that be an HR thing versus?
So the city of Salem has HR policy violations, and it's essentially a policy manual for the entire city. And then the police department has its own policy manual that's a little more specific into the role of law enforcement. So they overlap. And so the police department or they'll have something for duty is one of the rules of conduct. And in that rules of duty, we talk about the need to show up on time for work, to be prepared for work, to have your duty in order, your gear in order. So the city of Salem would also have something similar in their HR rules. And we generally won't say, okay, you violated the city of Salem policy and the Salem Police Department policy, and we're gonna take 2 allegations against you. We'll pick one or the other.
Okay.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, the police policy is much more narrowly scoped than the HR policy, because they have the entire city that they're writing policy for. The police department only writes policy for the police department. And then on top of it, if we do have professional staff, that we are investigating, then that would fall under like more HR rules. There's a few of us Salem police policies that would be covered under that, but generally it's the HR rules.
Okay. Yeah, you bet. Okay, so we kind of talked about, kind of some of the trends, but we haven't talked about the trend yet. Let me get into page 2 here. So you'll see, 2021, 2022, and 2023 professional standard policy violations. If you guys look at the top where it says sustained, not sustained, exonerated, unfounded, inactivated, open, we kind of had some questions about the open. A sustained policy violation is where through the investigation, based off of fact, there was sufficient evidence to support the allegation. So a sustained violation would basically mean we have evidence to support that what was alleged you did. And so a sustained finding is essentially yes, evidence is there and we have a sustained finding that you did what was alleged. So a not sustained is there's insufficient evidence or fact to either support or deny. And so a not sustained would just essentially say that we just do not have enough evidence to either support or deny the allegation. Okay. Sometimes you'll see those in what I would call a he said, she said, right? One person says one thing, the other person says the other, and there's just no evidence to kind of support the fact. An exonerating complaint means that it occurred. So we know it occurred through the investigation, but it was lawful and proper. So this happens sometimes in a use of force complaint where the officer did everything per the law, per their training, and a complaint was received on that use of force, and through the investigation, they're exonerated because it was determined to be lawful and proper under state law and City of Salem and Salem police policy. Unfounded is false and not factual. Through the investigation, we can show that the allegation or what was alleged just simply didn't happen. And inactivated is someone likely or would have resigned in lieu of investigation. So the investigation was occurring and they resigned during the investigation, and we weren't able to finish the investigation. So you guys will see that through 21 through 23, we went down from 83 to 43 to 23, and there's probably a lot of questions like, why are we seeing such a reduction of policy violations coming in? So if you turn to page 3,
Lieutenant, I apologize. I think Ryan's got a question.
yes, sir.
Hey, sir, just had a quick question. Sustained and unfounded. I mean, isn't it possible for an unfounded and how are you splitting the hairs between not sustained and unfounded? Because not sustained is just merely lacking evidence, correct? And unfounded is where there's some indication that it did not happen at all, but there could be situations where there's just no evidence and to say that it happened. And how do you decide between those two?
Sure. That's a great question, Ryan. Thank you. So, and I'll talk about this here shortly. So we now wear body worn cameras, for example. And so body worn cameras tend to capture they capture the entire event, word for word. We can see everything that's occurring on the body worn camera. And if someone were to allege something that we clearly could see on body worn camera just did not happen, that would be an unfounded essentially a finding of unfounded, right? We can clearly show that it's just false or not factual what we're seeing on body worn camera versus what was alleged. Not sustained would be just simply through the investigation. It possibly could have happened, it possibly could not have happened, but there's just not a sufficient enough evidence to say with certainty that what was being alleged occurred.
That's great. Thanks.
Ryan?
Yep, it does, certainly.
Okay. Yeah, perfect.
So sometimes this comes into play where there's some subjectivity, like maybe it's an employee to employee relationship that's, maybe one person's feeling one way and the other one, and there's maybe some animosity between each other. And it's like, hey, we don't have a clear like harassment violation, but things aren't right here. And it's kind of like, okay, we need to do something else, provide training, do something, workplace related. Does that explain it?
Okay.
Yeah,
any
that's great.
questions about the policy violation specifically? Okay, so we'll move on to, and we're gonna kind of go back and forth here because there's gonna be a lot going on as we proceed forward. But I'll kind of talk a little bit about, the professional standards unit, and, you'll see on paragraph 1 of page 3, it says was formed in 2021. So what does that mean to us? Does it mean that we never had a professional standards unit prior to 2021? Or did we simply just kind of maybe change the way we kind of handle or intake our complaints, and what does that unit mean? So prior to 2021, I happened to be in what we would call internal affairs when this happened in 2021, right? Chief Womack came in and did it around this time, 2020 timeframe. And we changed the internal affairs unit for what was just one sergeant, which was me at the time, to the professional standards unit in 2021. And so what does that mean? It means that, so professional standards encompasses so much more than internal affairs, right? They collect and do data and reporting such as what we're going over right now. They do internal affairs complaints. They evaluate best practice within the agency. They evaluate our policies, our procedures, a whole gamut of things that they do within the agency that simply goes much further than them just investigating complaints. And so that was in large part the reason for what we call a professional standards unit. We brought a second sergeant in, so there was now 2 sergeants to accompany this entire unit. We changed our practice in how a internal affairs complaint or investigation proceeded through the totality of the investigation. In doing so, I think past practice prior to 2021, we would intake a complaint much the same way we do today. The internal affairs sergeant would conduct the investigation. And then they would recommend whether they believed it was sustained, not sustained, unfounded. So in reviewing that, what's some problems? If I conduct an investigation, right? I am emotionally invested into this investigation, and I look at all the facts and I'm getting emotionally invested, yet I'm going to recommend that it's sustained or not sustained. Do you guys see a problem with that? My bias would show, right? I would be so emotionally invested that I might actually, I think this guy's guilty, I recommend sustained. Versus an independent person who knows nothing of the case coming over and looking this over and saying, actually, you didn't ask these things, or we need to look at this, or I'm not seeing what you're saying. So we took a hard look at that and changed our process flow. So now when Sergeant Galvin conducts an investigation, he is strictly just a fact finder. His opinions, his thought processes, it is just strictly based off fact. He's going to conduct a thorough investigation. He's going to write it down all on paper, and he's going to route it to a lieutenant within the agency. That lieutenant is going to receive that investigation. They're going to receive all the evidence, and they're going to put an independent set of eyes on that thing to comb through it, to recommend additional investigation, to recommend a sustained finding and not sustained. So we get a second set of eyes in the lieutenant who reviews the investigation. And then from there, we convene a board. And when the lieutenant will now recommend that sustained, not sustained, exonerated, unfounded, that second set of eyes is the one who looked at it and said, okay, I think it's this. And then we convene a board, and that board consists of human resources for the city of Salem, the city attorney's office, oftentimes Lori Evans, an independent lieutenant, so a lieutenant who has not reviewed this incident, and then the deputy chief over the division of where that officer works. The internal affairs professional standards unit investigators will present their case to this board. The lieutenant who reviewed it and recommended the findings will present this to the board. And then the board makes a recommendation to the deputy chief. The deputy chief makes the determination on the findings. So I just spewed out a whole bunch of stuff there to say that we really took a hard look at our process flow and refined it to the point where we are having multiple sets of experts within the agency and within the city take a look at an internal affairs process.
That also brought it up to industry standard, that we've been training across the country, or different parts of the country, we've been with other people from across the country, and that's industry standard at this point.
across the nation.
Something bringing into the board if it's not sustained as well.
Yes, yeah, so the
Either
board,
to recommend or not to recommend.
yeah, great question.
Action.
So,
And the board can always come back and say, no, we disagree with this. Or, hey, you need to go interview this person, or you need to look at this policy. They can make recommendations, come straight back to us as the investigators, and we do what they recommend. Or if there's a policy violation that we didn't look at, that we need to look at, because we can only ask questions narrowly scoped to the alleged policy that's being violated. So if in the investigation, if questions weren't asked that the board wants to know, we have to allege another policy violation. They can recommend that. It'll open up another portion of that investigation. We'll go back and interview. We'll ask those questions.
Yeah. So before I move on, I know I just I went on a 10-minute to do there. So if anybody has any questions, I'll move on.
I just have one. How often does the board disagree with the lieutenant's findings and recommendations?
That's a great question. Occasionally, yeah. They generally are, there's multiple sets of eyes that they've got to look on it. Where you'll more likely see a disagreement or a question is at the lieutenant review. And so the lieutenant will get the investigation, they'll thoroughly go over it, and if they have questions, they'll push it back on the investigator saying, these questions weren't asked, or I think we need to take a hard look at this, or why didn't we ask this question? You're alleging this, maybe you need to look at this a little bit differently. So there's a lot of work that's going in on those initial stages before it gets to the board. So there's a thoroughly investigative product that the board sees versus kind of like where we're missing things. So I can't think that the board, I'm sure that it has happened. I know there have been times where deputy chiefs have controverted the findings at various stages, but generally speaking, once the board receives it, it's a pretty thorough investigation.
Yes, I'd say that's fair.
Okay. Does that
Great,
answer
thank you
your
so
question?
much. Yeah, it does. Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's we kind of talked about in 2021 too. So we kind of talked about the allegations, and it went from well, actually, let me move on to actually formal investigations. Sorry. So in 2021, two sergeants, that was myself and another sergeant, conducted 34 formal investigations, meaning both internally and externally, we received complaints and we conducted 34 total investigations. In 2022, there was a total of 16 formal investigations. So we cut that nearly just over half, which was a decrease of 53% when compared to 2021. The decrease in formal investigations, along with the decrease in external complaints, there are several reasons likely for this. This is the same year that we rolled out procedural justice training. Okay, so this is the voice, neutrality, dignity, respect, and trustworthiness, right? So those are all tenets of the procedural justice. We rolled that out through in-service, through quarterly training. We incorporated it in all internal training with our cadres, so firearms training, defensive tactics, every facet of our training, we put procedural justice to really kind of hammer that down with our officers. And that's, as an example, we get rudeness complaints often because officers might be short with someone because then they're just busy. They're trying to get through the call versus giving that person a voice. Everybody wants to be heard when it's their time to talk, right? And so that's one of the tenets of procedural justice, is giving people a voice.
Gretchen, I think somebody.
Thank you.
So that's one of the reasons we believe we saw a decrease of internal and external, or especially external complaints coming in. And then in 2022, I was part of the the review process for our our body worn camera program. We see we outfitted our entire agency, officers and our cars, our in-car video systems with body worn camera and in-car video systems. And I'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. Having a body worn camera doesn't mean we're not receiving the complaint. It's just now handled a little bit differently once we review the body worn camera. So we did see a reduction in amount of complaints, formal investigations received. So part of the body worn camera that I talked about, in 2023, let me touch on this real quick. There was only 6 formal investigations compared to 2021, which is an 82% decrease from 2021 on formal complaints investigated. That doesn't mean we received, it means investigated, and I'll explain that here in a second. So part of body worn cameras, part of this report is officers are required to activate their body worn camera. It's part of our policy when they develop reasonable suspicion or probable cause to believe a crime or violation has occurred. Okay, they're stopping a vehicle because they have probable cause to believe a violation's occurred. They have to, per policy, activate everything: in-car video system, body worn camera. They're going to make contact with a suspect of what they believe they have probable cause that a crime's occurring or reasonable suspicion. And they have to activate their body worn camera. Generally speaking, though, and they have to run that through the entirety of the call. But generally speaking, they will activate their cameras on everything. It's just a way to document everything and have it out there that their body worn camera. But those are the requirements per our policy is this: if there's reasonable suspicion, there's probable cause, or and there's some other things in there, but that's generally speaking why they have to turn those on. Because of body worn cameras, they have significantly improved the department's ability to resolve complaints informally. Okay, so I talked a little bit about those formal complaints. Well, we also have what's called an informal complaint. We also have what's called a citizen contact. And so if you guys turn to page 4, actually, no correction. You guys can turn to the last page, page 5. I'm going to talk a little bit about formal, informal, citizen contacts, and so that way it makes sense what I'm talking about as I kind of explain all that. So you'll see the data there in 2021 through 2023, it went from 34 to 6 formal complaints. That didn't mean they went away, that we weren't receiving the amount of complaints. If you look at informal, we went from 1 in 2021 all the way to 10 in 2023. And that's because of our body worn camera system. Okay. Someone will file a complaint. Professional standards will intake that complaint, which is both internal and external. The very first thing they'll do is intake the complaint. They'll hear the side, they'll give that person a voice, listen to what it is their experience with the police were. And then one of the very first things we do is we look at the body worn camera. That's one of the reasons for policy we're allowed to look at our body worn cameras as supervisors. And that would be to look at the incident. And so oftentimes there's various stages of why either there was misunderstanding, maybe the police didn't do a great job of explaining the incident to the individual, and that's why they're filing the complaint. We go to the body worn camera, we see what occurred, and then it's just having a conversation with that individual and explaining the incident to them. If they want to come in and review the body worn camera, so maybe that gives them a different perspective, and that might have been handled at an informal level. And then they will be satisfied, they'll go through the process, review the camera, and they're satisfied with the end result of that investigation. That's documented as an inform. Does that make sense? Anyone have that?
I love the body cams as an investigator, right? Because it's a phenomenal piece of evidence, but it also does it gives us that outside view of everything. We've had allegations that have come in of theft. An officer stole a wallet out of a car when it was being impounded. Without body cams, we would take that and say, okay, we have this alleged crime. Now we have to send it to another agency state police, Beaverton, Eugene, someplace way outside of the city. To investigate that crime, because we don't investigate crimes on officers, outside agencies do that for us. So once that gets done, then we would do our own internal investigation. And it can take months. With body cams, this specific incident, we review all the body cams, because even if it's not hit record, it has what's called record after the fact, because it's always recording. Because as soon as you hit record, it goes back 30 seconds. There's just no audio. So anytime the body cam is on or like activated, turned on physically, it's recorded. And it just is on a loop cycle. So we can, even if they didn't have their body cam physically like activated, we can go back and look at from the moment they stopped that vehicle to the moment it was towed away, and we can say with 100% certainty, there was no theft that occurred. And that could take, I mean, we still have to document it like what we normally would, but we could clear that out or close that out as an informal investigation, because we can say it just actually did not happen.
Yeah.
So, and it's amazing.
Yeah. And sometimes we receive complaints where we look at body worn camera and we're like, that actually happened. And go forward with the complaint, right? So it's a great tool. In-car video is a great tool. To talk on that though, that's why you're seeing part of the reason why you're seeing the reduction of 34 to 6 and then 1 to 10. And then with the procedural justice and the renewed focus on that, the 4 tenets of procedural justice, I think we're seeing a reduction in the amount of formal complaints received.
Also real quick, if you go back and look at the 2023 policy violations, there's only 1 not sustained versus 11 sustained. There's none that were unfounded in that time period. It was, I mean, it's clear and concise information.
I did a vote, it's not telling me.
Well, please ask me that.
Yeah.
No, and I know this is excellent, I the procedure, and everything. Thank you guys, and there's not enough data to create any trends or anything like that, or statistically to see if it's even relevant, significant enough to say 23 to 11 is really a reduction. Given that, what I'm noticing here, the sustained percentage, since these numbers are assuming that 83 to 33 is not significant. And it may be, I don't know, once you have enough 20 years of that or something, it will make more sense. It's now more of a sustained percentage-wise proportionally than less. So 21 was 34.9, almost 35, 25% in 2022, and now it's like 48% almost sustained. So it could be because you're saying that the body cams are actually providing information that's more direct and definitive.
Mhm.
And there's like the 10 resigned or something in lieu of.
Yes.
So do we know, because the policy violation came to work late, as you said, versus.
Right.
So any division of the complaints in terms of severity of the policy, because it could be just don't be late versus we're firing with this.
So. And let me clarify that I heard that I make sure I answered the question correctly. Are you?
And I asked too many things.
No, that's okay.
Outstanding.
I want to make sure that I answered correctly. Do we compile data on the severity of the allegation?
I guess, like, is there some sort of a some pie chart showing this is like, minor, because it would be only command counseling versus possibly an economic sanction.
Sure.
The policies are not equal violations. And the same could be you were late, plus you stole that thing and your uniform was crooked, right? All of it could be, but one of them is severe.
We do compile all that data, so we do have data to show what allegations people violated, what crimes officers have committed, if they were subsequently investigated for, how many people we've terminated.
Sure.
I don't know that that's part of this annual report, we can certainly take a look at that, but we do have data to show it all.
But are we seeing a trend of some things getting better? in that, especially with the procedural justice, having that
Yeah, I don't know if we've looked at the numbers that way. We keep that for consistency purposes, right, across the board. We don't wanna, one employee hammer them for showing up late and the next employee, it's like, hey, it's okay. So we do keep that.
Yeah.
I don't think we've dove into that deep enough to see if there's the severity of
Because things.
policy trends like that. I'm just trying to think on the back of my head, and it's,
I haven't been in this field in a long time myself, I can't help but think,
Yeah.
especially when you're keeping statistics. But like I said, I really enjoyed procedural justice class, it probably will hopefully make a difference. You will always have a place for late. It's not gonna change, but hopefully it will change these other, more uglier side of things, wouldn't that be nice to see it's working?
yeah, and as I'm thinking about it, I think it'd also be a little bit more difficult to get that data because we use progressive discipline.
Sure.
So, I mean, that's.
But if it's
standard.
egregious enough, it's not progress.
Exactly, so. the
And those are the
showing
things
up
we're
late
trying to find, that's not happening, not that they were like, they were not being beautiful, it was not either, right? The real issue isn't the severe egregious ones that you would not say, don't do it again, this is just a reprimand, right? Those are the things you would terminate for,
Yes.
or they would resign in the, but I would love to see the progression, hopefully if you guys keep me on this board over the years, for that to see, and all over the country, not just, but this is my city, I love the city, I love you guys, I want to see that.
So there's absolutely a move towards being more transparent as a police department, right?
Okay.
So I'm part of a policy review program through the police department where we're looking at, so is Lori. Where we're taking a look at every policy we have in the city of Salem. We're working with a company called Lexipol. And we're anticipating being done with that process in approximately 6 months. When that process is done, we're gonna post the entire policy procedure for the Salem Police Department on our portals. In addition to that push for transparency includes the various things we were talking about when it comes to our formal complaints, our percentages, what our community is looking at when they're looking at their police department. Yes, to answer your question, yes, there is gonna be a look to kind of take a look at some of that stuff. In this particular report, we do not.
Okay, that's,
I have a question on trends.
Yes, sir.
So when you're looking at staying formal, is that more with newer officers or seasoned officers?
It's all over again. Yeah.
Okay.
It's all over. Yeah, all the way like going out to the people at the officers at the academy versus officers that are due to retire. It's all over.
No.
I was just wondering if there's a whole bunch of newer officers kind of muddying up the.
No.
Okay.
So I have-
just as it is.
With the new body cameras, are citizens more apt to make a complaint or less?
Great question. You're like talking in the field, they're talking to someone. who's-
Exactly, yeah.
So our officers are trained, there's multiple parts of that. So anytime they're dealing with someone that is of a sensitive topic, there's times that we'll deactivate our body worn cameras. So say it's a victim of a violent sexual assault or someone who's making requests like, I don't want to be recorded. Or it's a death of a family member or something that is sensitive in nature, the officer can turn off the camera at the request of the individual. But that doesn't mean they're required to, right? So if I'm arresting a domestic violence suspect and they're yelling at me, turn off your camera, I'm gonna be like, I'm not turning off my camera.
Right.
And so when it comes to complaints, we have field supervisors in the field. They will intake a number of complaints that will oftentimes either they'll resolve it in the field and handle the situation there, or it'll end up with their lieutenant, their patrol lieutenant, and then ultimately likely to Sergeant Galvin and myself. So generally speaking, people nowadays know police have body worn cameras. Everybody loves to go to the YouTube and watch it, right? It's all over crime TV. And so everybody kind of knows that we're operating these things, and generally speaking, for the vast majority of people, they will talk to us when we're running these things, including making.
If you look up the chart 5 here under citizen contacts, you can see that roughly they're, 2022 and 2023, they're pretty close. And those are the people just calling in, that maybe they didn't understand a situation. Maybe it's a rudeness complaint where they just want to be heard, and maybe we go and tell the officer, hey, try to have a little bit more compassion or something like that, right? So it's about the same.
Yeah.
So
it's about the same from not wearing body cameras to wearing, is that what you're trying to say?
For the complaints received.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just how we, like I was talking about earlier, how we investigate informally versus
Right.
formally.
Right.
You'll see the difference because we now have a piece of evidence. We have procedural justice training that all of these officers have gone through. And that key piece of evidence with body worn camera and our internal video systems of cars is just invaluable. So.
Right. Well, it's bold to have someone saying that the officer stole my wallet when they know they're on video. And it's like, dude, no, I don't think, I mean, to me, that's really stupid and bold. But
we still
people,
want those, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of like, we want people to reach and contact us because
and yeah,
maybe it did happen, because
Yeah.
there's some pretty, and I've been to training where larger agencies in California, that they would do like audits and stuff, and they find egregious things.
not bad,
So we still,
right?
we want people to complain.
I still feel that our citizens, just by reading some Facebook messages, start skimming because, it's 12 o'clock and I can't sleep, and that they're still, I mean, they still worry about, the safety of retaliatory, reporting, so, how do we fix that to be like, it's okay to report, you don't have to report to an officer, report to one of us, how do we get the word out that you can report to, so. Not that, we want everyone and their mother reporting, but we also need to make the community, especially, LGBTQ and minorities, saying it's okay, they're not out here to get you, but that's what they feel, we have to change that. I want to change that. And I can't deal with them myself, clearly, so, I think that's something we should work on. Someday is, just telling our community there's other people to report to, not just, I'm gonna send an officer out, so. And
We do get a lot of, or not a lot, we do get a fair amount from Gretchen too, people reach out to
Right.
Gretchen a lot.
I now don't work for this city, but I get complaints as they charge me because it's still an employee, and it still goes out to the same place to be investigated. So,
But I mean, people do complain, but then some people don't, and I think, there's a lot of factors in it, and how do we change those factors to make them feel safer? That's just my opinion, so.
they may not be complaining now because of safety reasons or any other reasons, so there's a huge jump there, right?
Well, I'm just saying in general,
Some people just don't, they complain to their friend, but not to the store, that, that is true for, customers shopping, whatever. But you guys are investigating every complaint, so no, I don't think you're saying, this is frivolous, this person is mentally challenged, takes time, no, they're looking at everything, so.
We will intake every complaint we receive, it's just how well. it's
Percentage
intaken.
of agency.
and I'm not saying that, I just read, so I talked to this one lady a long time ago that, she, there was an incident, and I said, I'll be glad to talk to you, this is what I'm on the board, I'll be glad to, I'm reaching out to her, I'm not in uniform, when she was like, thank you. And it was up to her discretion and her family if she wanted to reach out and, And I said, well, I know someone, you know, that could also help, you know, not naming names, but I just, you know, said that, you know, but, you know, of course, they were scared, you know, and I don't blame them. So, you know, just reaching out more is what I'm just saying. As a minority too, you know, so, yeah, but thank you. Got off topic.
Real quick, I want to touch on one thing before we kind of wrap up some of the statistics we were talking about. So we talked about citizen contacts and the intake of the complaints. We talked about the formal and informal and what we were seeing trend wise. One thing that you'll see here is their use of force incidents. We track all use of force religiously, very statistically. That's a whole separate presentation in of itself that we'll get into on our next CPRB. We do track officer involved crashes. You'll see that trend also was going down in 2023. The reason for that is many reasons. We have a great emergency vehicle operations training cadre. So anybody that's been through Citizens Police Review or Citizens Police Academy has participated in that. And then we just have more advanced cars. Everybody's got backup cameras in their Explorers now, and it means I'm not going to ram into a pole when I'm backing up, right? So
Sure, I managed to.
that happens, right?
Also in 2022 or 2021, we were still some of the COVID stuff, so our training was drastically decreased
Yep.
because of COVID. So we saw that a spike in a lot of different areas, including officer involved vehicle crashes. So now they're just starting to add more and more training every year, and we're starting to see that drop. So,
Did that include, oops, I forgot the name of it. Oh, never mind. Sorry.
Think of it, let me know.
Okay.
Last thing I want to talk about on that, the unit totals is what is an administrative review? And so an administrative review is if we have an officer involved shooting, right? That's a very looked at process on every level, from the district attorney to the police department to the external agencies that come and investigate that. So once an officer involved shooting occurs and it goes through the investigation process through the investigating agency, which typically is the Oregon State Police, the Marion County District Attorney's Office. Once that case goes through the grand jury and the end result of that case comes back to the Salem Police Department, the Salem Police Department takes an administrative review of the entire incident, okay? So what that means is we have several training cadre leads, that's firearms, emergency vehicle operations, taser, defensive tactics, confrontational simulations. These are our supervisors in charge of those sections who are experts, so to speak, on these particular topics. And they take a look at that entire case file of the investigation of the officer involved shooting, or what we call a critical incident that the officer was involved in. And they generate information on that for ultimately what is a board, including Lori and the city attorney's office and our deputy chiefs. And we review the entire incident in its entirety to see if we can improve upon training, process flow, our policies, our procedures, our practices in general. How did the incident unfold? Officer involved jeopardy, created jeopardy. So there's a whole bunch of things we look at, because we should internally as an organization take a hard look at any time anyone is involved in a critical incident that led to an officer involved shooting or would be the deadly use of physical force, right? So that's what you're seeing when you look at administrative reviews, is those reviews occurred that many times that year.
So 4 means incident, but that's not how many officers.
Correct. Yeah, that's 4 incidents that we did an administrative review. Okay.
and that can be in custody deaths as well.
Last thing I want to talk about is, on page 4, you'll see the total formal complaints, internal versus external. And what's really interesting about that is in 2021, it was 50-50 split across the board, right? So 17 received internal complaints, 17 external complaints that led to a formal investigation. In 2022, that went from 11 to 5. In 2023, 6 to 0. So the reason we're seeing more internal complaints, we believe, it really comes to a renewed focus on procedural justice, right? We have our officers really learning about that voice, neutrality, the trustworthiness, respect. And it comes down to our body worn cameras. Officers are more educated on those things. I think, you know, when they're seeing things happen in the field, they're going to report it, right? And so whether it's sustained, not sustained, or however we finalize the allegation, we're seeing the internal complaints a little bit more than the formals.
No, but if you compare that back to the citizen contacts on the last page, again, we're still receiving the same amount, or roughly the same amount of complaints from external sources. They just didn't go to the formal investigation level. The formal investigation, that is where very, very in-depth investigation. I think my longest report is 86 pages. And that doesn't include all of the evidence. That's just the written document. But we call the employees in, we interview them, and it goes through the board and all the way up to the chief and the decision making. Versus the citizen contact, we still investigate it, see if we have to go formal. It's just, it doesn't take, it's not as in-depth. If we can just look at the body cams and determine, yep, we can resolve this here, then we can do that. So it's interesting to me that 0 of the complaints from last year resulted in a formal investigation, but we're roughly getting about the same amount of complaints. But it's just the body cams that are drastically helping that. Yeah.
Why do you think-
Sorry, was somebody else gonna ask a question first? I can wait and table mine.
Oh, okay, right. I was just gonna ask, why do you think the use of force incidents are going down every year?
I would also say with procedural justice and some of the training we're providing, were the integrated tactics. There's an acronym for it. We're doing more training on communication skills, de-escalation, more training on those procedural justice, which giving people a voice, which helps that de-escalation. So
On that, real quick, before we move on from that, for that downward trend, in addition to some of these procedural justice and other training opportunities, is some of it that 2020, 2021 was a really hands-on time for policing as far as community involvement and a lot of eyes. I know we only have the data here, but from having investigated it, is this somewhat of a rightening of where we've seen things before 2020? Or
Okay, yes, and
Yeah.
thank you for bringing that up. I was just getting ready to start going down that path. So we all remember 2020, right? Between the nationwide crowd control situations, the George Floyd movement, the COVID. It was a year that I know I will never forget. But as a result, because of COVID, we'll start simply with just COVID. We couldn't train our officers to the degree that we did now. We had to pull them back. We had to do training from remote, computers and have them learn from a computer screen versus actually getting out there and participating in computational simulations or the driving. And that lasted for about a year and a half. So that naturally, when I'm not able to train and learn new things and not work on those skills that can quickly diminish if I'm not practicing quarterly or monthly or annually, you're going to see, you're likely going to see the increase in use of force because of the lack of de-escalation and the various things that can occur. And then we had we had many crowd control / protests that occurred in Salem that resulted in some elevated police contacts, where we saw some use of force occur there as well. So various stages like that. It was a time where I think we saw just a lot of police contact occurring that resulted in force, and now we're seeing that downward trend of what we would see to be more of in line with what our trends are.
the use of force annual report dives into that way deeper,
Extensively,
like
yes.
narrows way down to like individual force. so. I think, Brian?
Yeah. So that kind of gets to one of my questions is what other materials can we get access to read aside from this report today? If I want to understand a little bit more in between these quarterly meetings and just to kind of dive in myself a little bit and then maybe ask some better questions. I mean, obviously I don't want to step on toes. There's probably some you can't share, but what do you think you could share? The second question is, do we use any form of risk terrain modeling?
Restraint?
Risk terrain modeling. It is programmatic software that you plug in arrest and crime data, and you get projections around the city of where hotspots and other such things are. It's quite interesting.
Okay. I can touch on both those. So the first question is, yes, there is additional data that we do compile, that we do contain within the agency, kind of what I answered earlier about the various different things that we compile and track and monitor. That being said, this was the annual report, so we would need to go back to the agency and look at what else we are working on releasing. Part of that transparency that I talked about earlier with our portals, the websites, getting that information out there with our policies, our procedures, the Lexipol I talked about, and the additional data that we're looking at. So that's an evolving process that we are looking at, kicking more and more data out. So to answer the question, Ryan, the data we can provide today is essentially what's in this report and what will be in our use of force report that we release, which the use of force report has a tremendous amount of information that cross reports with our complaint process and some of the use of force that we're talking about today. And then in terms of the, and I'm sorry, you called it the risk averse?
Let me add one more thing.
Risk terrain model.
Yeah, before we move on to that, there is also the Salem Police Department Transparency Portal, and which is a great resource. If you Google Salem Police Transparency Portal, it'll pop up, or it's yoursalempd.com. And that's where it's intended to have reports like these posted there for the community, also with some of the chief's messages and stuff surrounding even the gun violence stuff is in there, I saw.
Okay, did that answer that first question, Ryan?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. Appreciate you entertaining me.
Okay. Yeah, and then I'm sorry, the second question again, sir.
Risk terrain modeling?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
It's a type of software that many departments are starting to use, city police departments nationally. I'm starting to see, and I wondered if we had any type of pursuit for that kind of programming.
Yes, I don't know that that's the name of it. I don't track that within our agency, but I do know that through our integrated assessment of the city and what we're looking at, that we do track hotspots for where we're seeing criminal activity, an increase in violent crime, and then we will direct resources into those areas to address particular hotspots within the city. And so we might see an increase in gun violence or robberies or just any sort of violence towards persons. And we will track that, we will note that, and then we will assign resources to particularly attack that or address that within that particular area. And so that's evolving as well. We do this, we meet monthly to discuss that and look at that data consistently.
It's called ICAP.
Okay.
Yeah.
ICAP?
We're on time, but can I ask one more question if it's okay with the board? So I was just thinking, because this is a policy violation perspective, and I'm kind of philosophically reasoning. So it occurred to me, Lexipol is good, but it's not great. Obviously, it's the national company for that you have to build it out. You said you're already looking at it, and some of these unfounded, unsustained, however we're calling it, do you find occasionally something bad happened, but it's not a policy violation? The policy had a hole in it. You can see it was, I mean, something could be, I always tell people, legal but still unethical kind of thing, right? Are we looking at he kind of fell through the cracks issues in fixing the policies with that too?
Yes, we absolutely do. And what I call that is lawful but awful.
Mhm.
And so
Yeah,
it was lawful, it was within policy, but it simply isn't the direction we want to go as an agency, and we're absolutely going to address that. And so in part of any sort of review of a investigation, the reviewing lieutenant or even the reviewing sergeant, the investigating sergeant can put that information in there, like, hey, in review of this, the lieutenant can say, in review of this incident, I noted these particular issues, and we need to address that as an agency, and that happens all the time.
It could just be even a wording, like one wording may not
Sure, but
include
comma.
the intent of the policy.
no, because of the switch from the IA to this, it could be a bad practice just to go with the policy, obviously, and I know you guys would have been just wanted to hear.
Yeah, so our policy, when I was hired 17 and a half years ago, we got a physical policy manual and it was in a 4-inch binder. That's how big our policy is. It's very, very inclusive of just about everything we do, so.
And then just to answer or to touch on one topic you brought up about Lexipol, it is kind of a national system that's kind of a out the box system, but to add to that, for the last 2 years, I have sat every Thursday from noon to 2 with Lexipol. Yeah, Lori. And we have taken a look at their out of the box policy and customized it per se. And so it is a customizable policy review that is unique to our agency and what our community, you know, as a whole has known about the young or has input with our agency. And so we are customizing that policy review to fit what's said.
And it has best practices too, so it's best of both worlds.
Case law.
Can we get Gordon Graham? Did he come down for it?
No.
I just want to commend you for going that direction. I think that's fantastic.
Thank you. Okay, so Steve and I took about the last hour. Does anyone have any questions? I know that was a ton of information to throw out, you guys. I appreciate you guys listening to us. Obviously, we're pretty excited about this. We really love the direction that our agency has gone in terms of professional standards, our review processes, and how we intake and look at these. And honestly, it's for the community, right? I mean, we want to make sure that we intake and give people a voice, like you've heard me say several times today about procedural justice. That's exactly what it is. And so we're kind of excited about this, and we kicked a lot of information out there. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to Gretchen, reach out to Lori, Steve, anybody within the agency. We'll try to get that information to you.
Great, thank you. So the next topic, or actually part of our agenda, it's the last part of our agenda. Was there any board member comments?
I've exhausted all of mine.
Me too.
So I do have a question. Someone was talking to Gretchen before you guys got here about how going to the police station and taking a tour. But is there a way that we could combine having a tour and having our meeting at the police station?
The tour would probably take the hour.
No.
Yeah.
It would take longer than. Yeah, we could absolutely. So we would have.
Just we extend the time maybe,
Right.
if you guys would want to.
Yeah.
If you guys are interested in doing that.
Absolutely.
Ryan, are you interested in doing that?
I am. I toured it the last time during my ride along, but I'd be happy to do it again.
Yeah, we're super proud of that place, and I would gladly spend a couple hours showing that place off. And so anytime you guys want to do that, just really set that up. So.
I'll go as long as there is a canine dog.
I just want to pet a dog.
I already had a big canine dog. The crap out of me. But I'm just kidding.
I think that'd be great. Every time I get a ride along, it's either we have to rush the car and take off real fast.
Yeah, and I've only seen like bits and
It's too late. I mean, maybe if there's a short agenda and then people wanna stay, can, or we can't do it earlier.
We can do it that way.
Yeah,
That's great.
Okay, shorter agenda, and then people who want to stay for the tour can, and people who want to leave can. Is that okay with you guys? Or do you wanna think about it? I don't
Do you
put on
want
the spot.
workdays, hours, or later, just like?
I think we're gonna have to look into it, because I remember when we talked about this
Yeah,
last time,
that
there's
was
something
important.
about it being the concern of public comment within a public forum that's not open to the public, basically.
When we talked about originally, we were gonna have to divide it so there was no quorum on the tour.
That was the topic, you're right. Okay, yeah, let me think that through, you're right.
Yeah.
You know,
about it.
yeah, exactly.
And I think we landed on, if anybody wanted one, they would just email me and I would just give them on to it.
That is what we landed on, so people could do individual tours, that way we don't move as a quorum. That's a big remember.
It took me about 10 minutes. but-
You're right. Because we want the public to access you, and it would be pretty hard to move through a tour without talking about the police and which is your business, and so. That's right, so I think we settled on it, it'd be hard to do that, but you could individually reach out.
Okay.
That's right, let's stick with that, you're right, we did that analysis before, does that? Yeah,
Okay. Any other board comment? If not, let's adjourn the meeting.
You.
Thank you.